That was Kamala Harris addressing a gathering in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's her first policy speech as the Democratic presidential nominee. This one focused on the economy, and certainly listening in, of course, with us is the CBC's Kris Reyes, following the story from New York. Kris, a lot of expectations in this first policy speech. What did you hear from Harris today? What stood out?
Well, she served what people were asking for, specifics. And so now there will be some specifics for her critics to sink their teeth into, Abby. But I think what really stood out to me the most, not just from Harris, but the speech that Donald Trump gave yesterday, is that both candidates are acknowledging what really matters most to voters in this election, particularly voters who may be either swing voters or independent voters. And that is issues that hit close to home. I don't think it's a coincidence that her first major policy speech focused not just on the economy, but the cost of food, the cost of housing, the cost of childcare, and not on foreign policy or immigration, even race relations, which was a big topic of discussion in this country just some years back. So I think we're going to hear a lot more about the economy. You know, she mentioned the price of bread yesterday. Trump gave his speech, and in the background, he had everyday items with him as he gave that speech. He had a box of Cheerios, he had bread, he had bacon. That is going to be one of the biggest talking points in this election. The other thing that stood out to me is how she repeated that defining goal, should she be elected into office, which is to build up the middle class. She also talked about her personal story and why she's the best person, in her opinion, to fight for the middle class, because she grew up in a middle class household. She mentioned growing up with her mom, who was a renter for many years. She talked about her experience working at McDonald's and how she was side by side employees who were using that job to feed their families. She really highlighted that part of her story. She also highlighted how her administration would be very different from Donald Trump. She talked about Donald Trump taxing gas, food, clothing, over-the-counter medication. Talked about how Trump would repeal the Affordable Health Care Act. Now, this really stood out to me, Abby, because what I was listening for is how she would position herself up against Biden's administration. And we know that Obamacare, or the Affordable Health Care Act, was a major piece of legislation passed by Barack Obama, and then President Biden built upon that. And now she's saying that she's going to build on that foundation. So we thought she was going to distance herself from President Biden a little bit, but it looked like she's presenting herself as somebody who can continue to build on the policies that they were very proud of, particularly that Affordable Health Care Act. And then let me just go through some of the specific policy points that she talked about. She talked about going after price gouging, and that as Attorney General of New York, she won $1 billion for consumers. She talked about new penalties for opportunistic companies that take advantage of crisis circumstances. She talked about lowering drug prices for seniors. She talked about the cost of housing and how she wants to give everyday Americans the dignity and the pride of owning a home. She talked about giving first-time home buyers a $25,000 credit to help with the down payment. She talked about going after corporate landlords that bring up the price of rent and the cost of homes. And then she talked about the middle class tax cut that she plans to enact, including a child tax benefit that would give money back to families as they raise the kids in those very early years that could be expensive. And you heard a lot of in her speech, Abby, mentioning everyday things that families have to deal with, almost to communicate that she knows what they're going through. She knows that you have to buy back to school supplies for kids, and that those can cost a lot of money. She talked about the cost of diapers, things like that. So again, specifics were served in the speech, but in keeping with what's become a little bit of a theme for Kamala Harris, that ability to really connect with voters on a very human level.
Kris, we also heard Kamala Harris take a dig at Donald Trump when she referred to him giving that speech a couple of days ago, where it was, sold to us by his campaign as something that would focus on the economy. He seemed to have a hard time doing that. There was a lot of personal attacks once again. So how are you expecting the Trump campaign itself now to receive this speech that she's given on the economy?
I always say it's politics. It's always a matter of interpretation and perspective. And we've certainly heard Donald Trump talk about lowering costs for everyday Americans as well. I mean, the difference is how he plans to do it. One of the, the biggest signatures of his campaign promises is to drill, baby, drill. He wants to lower energy costs, and he believes that subsequently lowering energy costs will lower prices. So I think we can expect the Trump campaign, and Trump included, to receive some of these specifics as what they've labeled dangerously liberal policies. So what Kamala Harris is talking about when it comes to going after price gouging, very likely we'll hear from Donald Trump that's just more regulation, the kind of regulation that you see from the Democrats that don't work, in their opinion. When you talk about lowering the cost of groceries, again, by creating more either government penalties or incentives, they might see that as price fixing. And we know what he has done with those labels. He has repeatedly accused Kamala Harris of not just being socialist in some of her ideas, but again, dangerously liberal and very much to the left of the political spectrum.
Thanks for